Well, I guess we'll get going, and I just want to first thank you all for coming. My name is Paul Shively, and I work for the Montana Human Rights Network. For those of you who don't know what the Montana Human Rights Network is, and not to be confused with the Human Rights Commission, we're a nonprofit group based in Helena with local affiliates throughout the state. And our mission in the state is to educate people and work to stomp out intolerance and bigotry. And a lot of our work deals with gay and lesbian advocacy, exposing a lot of the facts and truths behind the militia movement and the far right in general. Just as far as that goes, because we're a nonprofit, we don't take any government money. We rely on grants and folks like you, and we have brochures out on the table up front. And if you like what you hear tonight, we certainly encourage you to take a brochure and join the network. It makes a big difference for us to be able to bring in people like Klaus Stern. A couple upcoming events. One main one is October 19th in Billings is our annual conference. And the title of our conference this year, and there's also brochures for this out there, is Foundations of Democracy, Family and Civic Values. And trying to just capitalize on the whole idea of family values that we see driven to us through the Christian right these days. The keynote speaker is a woman from Evergreen State College by the name of Stephanie Coops, and she wrote a book called The Way We Really Are, and she basically breaks down a lot of the myths associated with what is considered a traditional family. And there'll also be tracks on Native American families, gay families, as well as our usual tracks on the militia and the far right movement. So if folks are interested, there's a brochure out there for that. And also coming up in November, it looks like here in town, we're going to be bringing in a speaker by the name of Frederick Clarkson. He used to be the primary researcher for Planned Parenthood and was one of the pioneers as far as uncovering the movement between the violence on women's clinics and the militia movement and other far right affiliations. So it's a great speaker. He just wrote a new book called Eternal Hostilities, the Conflict Between Theocracy and Democracy. And so we encourage you to keep your ears open for that. The last 2 days I've had the honor of traveling around with Klaus Stern, our speaker tonight, and I must tell you, going around to high schools throughout northwestern Montana and seeing the effect that he's had on kids and the response they've had has been very moving, and I look forward to doing it again tomorrow down in the Bitterroot. I won't go into a lot of detail on Klaus's history because we have a little video that does a great job of giving you a background on him. So with that, I ask you to welcome Klaus Stern, and I'll start the video.
People are celebrating a day of freedom this Saturday.
This is the 50th anniversary marking the liberation of the most infamous of the Nazi death camps, Auschwitz. And though this single day celebrates the liberation from that camp, that is not what some survivors remember most. More from Cairo's Julie Blacklow.
1/17/033. And they asked me, did it hurt? I said, did you ever get a shot against measles? Oh, it hurt. I said, it was about like 50 shots.
42/008. See, that is the beginning of the grandchildren asking, what is that, And who puts it there? Bad people. Why did the bad people do that?
That is one question Klaus and Paula Stern still cannot answer, even though 54 years have passed since the Nazis branded numbers on their arms the day they arrived at Auschwitz. Newlyweds, in the spring of 1943. They had married just 9 months earlier, both born and raised in Germany, aware of the Nazi threat. Though other friends were leaving, the Sterns stayed behind, young, naive, and unable to imagine what was about to happen.
They took us in the early morning hours to a lonely train station, and they put about 70, 80 Jewish men, women, children in a cattle car, There was some straw on the floor, and they shut the door, and here we went into the unknown.
And then when they opened the gate, I think we realized right away
There was something wrong. No farms, no cities, electrified barbed wire fences.
And the uniforms of the inmates, you know, with the uniforms, and then the SS with the dogs.
The older ones, they say, I didn't get my stuff. Forget about your stuff. Get going. You lost everything you owned.
Everything.
There was one man standing in front, a little podium. We didn't know that was Dr. Mengele, the infamous doctor from Auschwitz. And with a woman's hand, he sought out who shall live and who shall die. Old men on one side, old women with children, women without children, young men, young women. We didn't have time to say goodbye. They pushed us aside, kept going.
All the hair was taken off, the numbers were put on the arm. That went one thing after the other, and you couldn't even breathe in between.
But Klaus and Paula Stern had made a pact, a promise, that if and when they survived, they would go to Paula's hometown of Arnstadt and wait there for the other to arrive. It would be more than 2 horrifying years before that promise could be kept. 2 years of humiliation, starvation, and torment. The very worst of what human beings can do. Survival meant coping with the knowledge that as many as 12,000 people a day were being slaughtered.
You didn't smell it anymore. You didn't see the smoke anymore. You just didn't think of it anymore. And just were thinking, well, maybe tomorrow something is going to happen.
That kept us always going, you know, another day, another thing. Hope. And maybe I thought maybe sometime maybe God let us live another day, I don't know.
The Sterns never saw each other again at Auschwitz, and over the next 2 years were sent to 4 other concentration camps. Then, in January 1946, the Americans and Russians arrived in Auschwitz to liberate those who were barely alive. Paula Stern kept her promise and went home to Arnstadt. It took her 3 months to get there, where she found some old friends who'd received a letter from Klaus.
But it was all crumpled up, you know. And the only thing I could read was that, stay, I come as quick as I can.
The first thing I do, I get out of Germany. But first I had to find my wife. And the other was, they took off, and I went around from one city to another one.
I got to my hometown end of July.
And then I made it eventually to that little town there.
And they called me, he's here. So it was about 10 minutes walk. So I went there, and there he was.
There I was.
So then from there, just like nothing happened. There must have been a reason that we survived. The reason is to talk about, to tell about what's going on.
We didn't survive to start hating everybody. Then we would be no good, we would be like the Nazis. We survived in order to do something for the better the world and not to start hating again.
While the rest of the world designates one day in January to remember the liberation of Auschwitz, Klaus and Paula Stern cannot mark time that way. To them, Auschwitz is not a day, but a memory from which they could never and would never seek liberation.
Well, you don't want to forget. I mean, we would never forget, you know. And you are happy that you are alive, that you can live that life. But you always think, you know, it's always with you. It's always with you.
Julie Blacklow, Cairo News, Seattle.
An estimated 200,000 Holocaust survivors are still living today. Most are in the United States and in Israel. The youngest are in their mid-60s now, the oldest in their 80s and 90s.
Cairo News will continue in just a moment.
Good evening. I don't know how many of you saw the movie Schindler's List. I don't know, maybe some saw the movie. This was one of the best Holocaust movies ever made. If you remember, the one who saw, there was Mr. Schindler. He was a Nazi like anybody else. He grabbed 1,300 people, opened a factory in order to get rich and to try to avoid going to the Russian front and fight against the Russian army. But later on, of course, when he saw the little girl in the red coat dead, be carried away, this man became a different person, and he protected his 1,100 people working for him, and they survived. Now, I wasn't lucky enough to work for Schindler. I had to fight, like my wife, we had to fight on our own to make it. I was born in Germany and grew up in Berlin, the capital of Germany, a city of about 4 million people. My dad was a veteran of World War I. His two brothers were decorated, him and his two brothers were decorated with the Iron Cross, which is something, a medal for bravery. In fact, another uncle died fighting against the French army. And my dad never could figure out something could happen to him, because before Hitler came, we were like anybody else, citizen of the German Reich, like the German country. We had a good background, no trouble with the law. And my dad said, when Hitler came up to power, well, Hitler doesn't mean us. He means those people who came to Germany without passports or illegal or black market people. We are good citizens. I did my duty. I fought against the enemy. I fought for the fatherland, for the Kaiser, for the emperor. I'm a good German citizen. But sooner or later, you found out anyhow it could happen. When Hitler came to power, little by little, we could figure something out. In a big city, it wasn't too bad. But in the smaller cities, people were thrown from the sidewalk. The Jewish kids had to suffer in the school already. They were ganged against people. They beat them up and pushed them around. But in Berlin, it was a world city. You didn't feel the anti-Semitism right away. 6 weeks after Hitler came to power, the first thing he did, he started building the first concentration camp near Munich. The name of the camp was Dachau. And the first inmates of Dachau weren't Jewish people at all. Those were communists, gypsies, homosexuals, Jehovah's Witnesses, anybody who didn't fit in Hitler's program. And they kept those people for 6-8 weeks, hard labor, not enough to eat, marching all day long, beating. And when they let them go after 6-8 weeks, they told them, if you reveal anything that happened inside the camp, we put you back in again. So when your father or brother came back to the family, and your mother must have asked, what happened to you? Oh, I'm not going to talk about it. They told me if I ever say anything about Dachau, they put me back in again. So the first 5-6 years, people didn't even know what it meant to be in a concentration camp, because the ones were in, they kept silent. A few weeks after he came to power, after they started with a camp in Dachau, he created the secret police, the Gestapo. This is a group of people who helped the Nazis later on bringing the people to the camps, to the different death camps. Hitler meant what he said in his book, My Struggle, My Kampf. For instance, the 1st of April, 1933, he staged a one-day boycott against all Jewish business. You could see that Nazis came with a pail of white paint, made a Star of David on the windows. This is Jewish business. Don't buy from the Jewish people. The Jews are our misfortune. And here you could see many times the owner of the business standing, leaning against the window with the Iron Cross and other medals from the World War I, had to see how the Nazis forbid people to come and buy something from his own store. But that lasted only one day, and the Jewish people said, well, that's a bunch of gangsters, a bunch of unemployed people, everything will be all right. That was good for about 6-7 months, and then Hitler showed them what he's going to do. Overnight, he fired all professors, educators, judges, government workers, and threw them out of the job, and replaced those people with the German people. And those people who need the money, they had to do, all of a sudden, construction work in order to make a living. For instance, my first bad experience was, I had a very dear friend, a non-Jewish boy, Walter, and here after school, I suppose the kids go play baseball, basketball, football. But in Germany at the time, and still is, the national game is soccer. So here we were young boys, 13, 14 years old. After school, we went to the football field and played soccer. But my good old buddy, Walt, he had a very nasty stepmother, and she told him, you're not going anywhere to play before you clean up the restaurant. They had a restaurant business. And here, in order to help my good buddy, Walter, every day, the first thing after school I went with my friend to the restaurant. We put the chairs on the table, mopped the floors, dusted everything, and then the mother came and said, okay, you guys beat it. And one day come my best friend and said, Klaus, we can't play together anymore. I said, what's the matter with you? We are buddies for years and years. I helped you. We never had an argument. No, he said, that's not that. Tomorrow I have to join the Hitler Youth. And if anybody sees me playing with a Jewish boy, my parents are going to lose the business. Here I lost my best friend and buddy, Walt, because he had to join the Hitler Youth, and I was Jewish. It was a big shock to me. I was about 13, 14 years old. In 1935, Hitler called all his delegates together to Nuremberg, which is the second largest city after Munich, and he proclaimed the so-called Nuremberg laws. All of a sudden, all Jewish people who lived like in our family, my parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, as far as I can look back, we all were born in Germany and lived in Germany. But we were made overnight second-class citizens. Jewish doctors couldn't treat any more German citizen, had to treat only Jewish patients. A lawyer couldn't have any more non-Jewish clients, only Jewish clients. And for everybody, come orders, you can go after 8 o'clock on the street, you can go attend concerts, you can go to sports event. We were all of a sudden isolated. Then came another ordinance. All Jews have to go to the closest police station and you get your brand new identification card. So I went to the police, I was fingerprinted like a criminal, and I was told, come back in 3 days and pick up your card. So after 3 days, I went back, and what the Nazis did, they went back to the Bible and selected 2 Jewish names. For the men was Israel, and for the women, Sarah. So when I picked up my identification card, there was a big J for Jew, and all of a sudden my name was Klaus Israel Stern, and my younger sister, Rena, had a name, Sarah Stern, Rena Sarah Stern, to identify us as Jews. Which meant any time you go to any office, bank, or whatever you go, and you come to the front, and you have to show your card, oh, you're Jewish, you go back in line. First come our German citizen. And later on, when the war started, and you stay there for bread, butter, eggs, whatever you needed, when you come to the front, oh, you're Jewish, first come the citizen, back in line. And by the time you came second time to the front, maybe the bread, butter, eggs, whatever you needed was gone for a day, and you stayed there for nothing. But those were small things for us. I mean, after all, it could have been worse. But in 1938, another ordinance came. All Jewish Polish citizens and stateless citizens have to leave Germany within 72 hours. There were families who lived in Germany for 40, 50, 60 years. They had children, they went to school, to universities. And there was one family from Hanover, one of the biggest cities in Germany, with the name of Greenspan. And they had to leave like anybody else, the business, the home, or they could take along 2 suitcases and a backpack. And how can anybody sell your home or your business within 72 hours? That's what the Nazis exactly wanted. If you can sell your business or your home, that's fine. Move out, and the Nazis grabbed your home without paying and your business without paying. That's what Hitler wanted, make those people wealthy on German poverty. So those people were brought to the Polish border, and Germany asked Poland to let those people in. But Poland said, no way. Those people don't have a guilty passport. They live 40, 50 years in Germany. You keep them. But later on they agreed to put those people between Germany and Poland on no man's land in old, dirty, unheated barracks. They lived like animals, not enough food, leftover food, and no heat in winter time. And somehow the Greenspan family had an older son studying in Paris, France, and he had a teenage daughter with them. And somehow the daughter smuggled a letter out to her big brother to Paris, France, saying, Herschel was his name, Herschel, look what the Nazis did for us. We lost everything we owned. We have no more business, no more home. Here we live like animals in dirty barracks. Please help us. Please do something for us. And when Herschel received the letter, he got so angry, he said, I'm going to do something about it. The world should know what happened in Germany. He went to a gun shop in Paris with the intention to kill the German ambassador in Paris. The next morning, he went to the embassy, and he rode up with a very well-dressed man, and the man asked him, say, young man, what do you want in the embassy? He said, oh, I want to see the German ambassador. And the man asked him, you have an appointment? No. Well, you can see the ambassador without an appointment. This very man was the German ambassador. If he would have told Greenspan he's ambassador, he would have killed him right going up in the elevator. Anyhow, Greenspan went up, and he went from one door to another one, and when he came to the door of the third secretary of the embassy, Ernst von Rath, he opened the door and said, okay, I couldn't get the ambassador, I'll let you have it. You abused me long enough, and he shot him twice. Rumors went around that the secretary and Greenspan had a homosexual relationship, and he couldn't find anybody else. He wanted to punish him for everything, and he shot him twice. The man didn't die right away, but Hitler heard about it and sent 2 of his best doctors to Paris, France, and after 2 days, the man died anyway. When the first news came over the radio, the Jews still had the radio. They took the telephones and radio away from us in '39. My dad said, oh my goodness, that could only mean trouble for us. And sure enough, as soon as the news came over the radio that Ernst von Rath, the secretary, died, the press secretary, Joseph Goebbels, went to Hitler and said, I just received the news, our man shot by the Jew died. Now we can do something against all the Jewish people in Germany. Hitler said, don't bother me with details, go to Hermann Göring, the second man in charge, or to Himmler, and take care of everything. But Goebbels, he was so full of ego and beaver, he didn't ask anybody, but he did. He gave phone calls, made phone calls, sent out telegrams, and within hours, 35,000 Jewish men in the age from 18 to 65 were arrested and brought to the different camps. After Hitler built the first camp in Dachau, he built a camp near Berlin, Sachsenhausen, a camp near Weimar, Buchenwald, and Bergen-Belsen. That's a camp where Anne Frank died just a few weeks before liberation. And they kept those people for 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and if some older person died, the family got a telegram, your husband died of a heart attack, go make arrangement, pick up the body from the camp. And it was the last time, of course, people saw the head of the family. Now, after this, the Nazis moved in and went to the homes and to the apartments, threw out furniture out of the windows, broke the show windows from the business. They went like wild through the cities all over Germany and Austria. And when that happened, the claim conference figured out they had claims for about $25 million, which is nothing today, but at that time in the 30s, $25 million was quite a bit of money. So they went to the government saying, if we pay out all the claims which the Jews made, we might as well close up the business, or we be broke. Oh, Hermann Göring, the second man in charge, said, don't worry about it. Next morning came another ordinance. All Jews have to pay a fine of 5,000 Reichsmark, which is about $600-700. And if you can get the $700 together, bring your valuables like jewelry, paintings, likas to a certain office, and that's it. And my mother was always kind of careful and scared. She took her jewelry. Jewelry was handed down from my grandmother, great-grandmother, one after another, and took her jewelry, her paintings, her likas to an office, and she got a slip. Mrs. Stern brought this and this in, and that was all she got for all the stuff she brought in. And after everything was collected, the big shots went to the offices and looked over the goodies, and they picked up the best stuff, and the leftover was auctioned to the people, and the money they made went back to the claim companies. With other words, the Jewish people had to pay for their own punishment. I worked at that time in November 38 in a wholesale house for underwear, and we had two shifts, from 8 to 4 and from 9 to 5. And on the 9th of November 38, I had the early shift, and I came in from 8 to 4. And as I walked home to the station I had to take the train back to my parents' home, I heard some noise in the side street and some splittering of glass and carry on screaming. I looked out, and here were the Nazis, the brown shirts, coming through the streets, throw the furniture out of business, from the windows, from the apartment houses. And I went back to my company. I told my boss, please close everything, shut the lights off, the Nazis are after us. So I went to the train to go home, and I looked out on the way home. I looked out of the window, and I couldn't believe my eyes. Sometimes when you go home, you might see a fire in the evening, and the skies are sometimes red, blood red or something like this. And I looked out to both sides of the train. My goodness, the sky all over Berlin was kind of red. I said, that's impossible. It couldn't be fire all over Berlin. But sure enough, after I left the train station and walked home, I went by our synagogue, and the synagogue was burning, was up in flames. What the Nazis did, after Goebbels told everybody what to do, the Nazis came and forced the janitors of the temples and synagogues all over Germany, Austria, Czechoslovakia to open the door. They poured gasoline over the seats, threw a match to it, and all the buildings went up in flames. In our synagogues, there was a fire department standing around, the police, the brown shirts, the Nazis, and some German people. They were singing and clapping. Oh boy, how nice it is. And the fire department had an order, just let the building burn down, just watch that the fire doesn't spread to the next building. So the next morning we woke up, we looked around, we looked to the church, we looked to the bishops in Berlin, we looked to everybody. What are people going to say about it? Well, some people said, Hitler went too far. You don't fool around and burn down houses of worship. But that was all came out of the people. So we looked to the big powers at the time, England, France, but nobody opened their mouth. And when Hitler saw that the world kept silent, he said, well, nobody cares for the Jews, now I can go ahead with my program. And they said, in history they say, the night from the 9th to 10th of November 1938, the night of Kristallnacht, when they burned everything down and broke the windows off, the show windows and so on, this was really the beginning of the Holocaust, because Hitler could go ahead without anybody helping. Now the only country really tried to help was England later on. But that wasn't a move for sympathy, that was a political move. Because in summer 1938, Hitler called the Prime Minister from England, Chamberlain, and the Prime Minister from France, Daladier, to come to Munich to sign a peace pact. He told the two guys, well, I got everything I want. I got Danzig back, I got the Saarland back, I got some other territories back in the south of Germany. I have nothing to claim anymore. That's all I want. But 6 weeks later, he came and marched into Czechoslovakia and took another part away from Czechoslovakia. And when Chamberlain saw what happened, he felt like a fool. He felt betrayed. And he went before the parliament, begging the parliament, pleading, please let me bring about 25,000 Jewish men, women, children to England. I know exactly what the Nazis do to the Jews. Please do something for them. But the parliament told him, listen, we have so much unemployment, we don't want any grown-ups. If you want to do something good, we let you bring about 12,000 Jewish boys and girls in the age from 7 to 16, and that's all we can do for you. So the parents, the Jewish parents in Germany, Austria, Czechoslovakia received flyers and letters. If you want to save your child, bring your child to Berlin, and we transport your child to London, England. So many people came all the way to Berlin, and they took those kids to a lonely train station with the parents, and the little kids, 7, 8, 10, 12, 13, 14-year-old, they said goodbye to the parents, and the parents said goodbye to the children, and most of the parents or children never saw each other again, because a few months later they were picked up and brought to the camp. First, I don't know how you remember the younger folks here, when you went the first time to summer camp and you didn't see the parents for a week, that was a big deal. So I'm so homesick, but those kids, little kids, never saw the parents again, like I say. My sister was about 13, 14 years old at the time. She could have gone to England also, but my dad said, we are one family, we stick together, whatever happened, we stay here and we don't move out. So after that happened, another order came in 1939. All Jewish people have to sell their business by end of March. If your parents had a $100,000 business, the Nazis came, okay, we give you $35,000, $45,000 for that. You like it? If you don't like it, we put you to the different camps. And people were so scared and so worried, they give the house away for half price, they give the business away for half price, just to have peace of mind. Of course, later on, they know better, they were picked up like anybody else. When they closed the business down in 1939, the Jews were, of course, forced to do some construction work. My dad was already in his 60s, he never did anything like this, but he had to do street work like anybody else. And I had to do construction work outside Berlin. But later on, I went to a farm, big farm near Berlin, to learn to become a farmer, because an uncle of mine from England sent a permit for me to come over 1st of October 1939. But he said, we don't want any business people, but we need here some farmers. So I figured, well, I'll start farming, maybe I can get over. Of course, 1st of September 1939, the war started, and whatever I had on the permit, I could just tear apart, I couldn't make it anymore. So we left on a farm near Berlin, about an hour with a train. We had about 200 young men and women, and what we had to do when the war started, the Nazis took the younger farmers from the farms, and we had to replace the farmers, all first in the farm, and then we go out every day and do work for the different farmers. And we felt pretty safe, because in 1942, the Nazis came and picked up my parents and younger sister and my wife's family, and we couldn't even join our parents because we were told, you do more important jobs for the government. You can join your parents later on. Of course, I never saw my parents again. So we felt pretty safe. Well, if you do more important job, that's good, safe for the time being. When they drafted more and more people, I remember I was 18 years old at the time when the war started, we were ordered from the farm to appear before the draft board. We were supposed to be there 8 o'clock, which we were, and the sergeant let us wait 1, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we were told, show your papers, and the guy said, oh, you guys are Jewish. Hitler doesn't want any Jews fight for Germany. Put a big 4F in our papers, get home, go where you came from. Maybe the fate meant that we be surviving, because if we would have been fighting in the Russian front, maybe I wouldn't be here today. So we were sent back to the farm and worked there. We had, like I said, many young men and women, and in 1942, I met my wife on the farm. She was working on the farm too, and we got married in August 1942. And we figured it's easier for two people to fight whatever comes than being alone. So we were left alone until April 1943. In 1941, Hitler broke the non-aggression pact with Stalin, and he marched in August 1941 into the Soviet Union. The German Wehrmacht, the army, was so powerful, they took one province after another, and when they came to the Ukraine, they picked the men, mostly farmers and peasants, picked them up, and they sent those people back to Germany, And little by little, the farmers had some manpower to work for. And one day in April, they came to our camp, to our farm, and told us, get ready. You will be shipped first to Berlin, and then you have to go back east and work on a farm. But before we were sent to Berlin, we had to fill out a slip like, since we are spies and traitors against the German government, we have no rights to live anymore within the German border. Now we had some couples on the farm, they had 5, 6-year-old children or babies. So the father had to fill out, my son, 6 years old, is a traitor, is a spy against Germany, or another, my baby is 6 months old, he or she is a spy or traitor, and she doesn't have no business to live anymore. Ridiculous. That Germany, bureaucratic, everything just so. So they took us to Berlin on a train first, and they collected us in a very big former Jewish nursing home. They took the old people already before we came. And we waited there 3-4 days. And on the 19th of April 1943, the press secretary Goebbels sent a telegram to Hitler saying, tomorrow on the 20th is your birthday, and in honor of your birthday, we will, from now on, tomorrow, Berlin will be free of Jews. Judenrein, no more Jews in Berlin. That's our gift from us to you. So they took us on the 19th of April 43 to a lonely train station, and there were some cattle cars, and they shoved 60, 70, 80 men, women, children into the cattle car. There was some straw laying on the floor, and pail to relieve yourself, and they shut the door, and here we were without any food for 2 days in a cattle car. You know, we didn't have any food, but we were so excited and we were anxious what's going to happen. Sure, they told us we work on a farm, and the women do factory work, making uniforms for the party, or making uniforms for the army, or work in an ammunition factory, and we believed those guys. You know, sometimes people say, how come you went like a bunch of sheep in the gas chambers? You know, in Germany, even before Hitler, nobody carried any arms, any weapons. So only one carried weapons was the police. And of course there was not too much crime even before Hitler or during Hitler time. So how could we defend ourselves against all those Nazis and other people? So we had to follow orders. So we went for 2 days in a cattle car, and when they opened the doors from the cattle car, we saw all of a sudden, we looked out, there were no farms, no cities. We saw some prisoners running around in striped uniforms, and here came the SS guards with the German Shepherd dogs, and they chased us out of the cattle cars. Get out of here, that is not a resort, let's get going. And they took us to a big empty field, and all that mess, I don't know how well you can see that empty field. This was a station of Auschwitz-Birkenau. That was a place where they gassed people. That was the main station in Auschwitz to kill the people. In all that mess, there was one man standing on the podium with a whip in his hand, and he started sorting out people by the age. We didn't know who it was first. Later on we found out that was the infamous Dr. Joseph Mengele, that was the head doctor from Auschwitz, and he made experiments on women, children, especially on twins, and he sorted out the people according to their age. He shouted, old men on one side, old women on one side, women with children, women without children, young men, young women. I didn't have time to say goodbye to my wife. We were pulled apart, women on this side, men on this side. And the older people were told, now you must be tired from the long trip, maybe you want to take a shower first, change clothes. Why don't you walk over just 1.5 blocks, 2 blocks to the shower and take a nice shower. There were some older people saying, you know, we are kind of tired from the trip, I can walk so good. Oh, don't worry about it. So they brought some trucks over, loaded about 30, 40 people on the empty trucks, and took one a bunch of people after another to the so-called showers. And in front of the so-called showers, there were inmates, and they gave everybody a bar of soap, just to fool people to the last minute. So the first 100, 150 people went into the so-called showers, and somebody must have said, hey, that doesn't look like a shower to me. Let's get out of here. But that time was way too late. Here came the Nazis with the clubs and with the germ, with the biting dogs, and they pushed the people back in, and another 100 people, and another 100 people. And when they had about 500, 600 people, they shut the doors, and here the people were waiting for the water coming out for a shower. What the Nazis did, they put in all the shower heads that very strong poison gas, cyclone B5. That's a powder which dissolved in about 3-4 minutes from the body heat of the people, and about 10 minutes it took, and a whole bunch of people, older people, were gassed, dead. On the other side of the so-called showers, there were crews. They worked 24 hours around the clock in 8-hour shifts. And when after the people were dead, they pulled the pants out from the people and the jackets and bundled everything up. They took the rings off, they took the wallets off, the watches. And another crew came and opened everybody's mouths, and if they found some gold teeth, they knocked the gold teeth out and put it in bags, and everything was shipped back to Germany, because the American and English Air Force came to the big cities like Berlin, Munich, Hanover, Hamburg, and bombed out. Many people lost everything they owned. So what they did, in order to keep people happy, they shipped our goods back to Germany. Only the lucky ones like myself and my wife, of course she had to go a different part of the camp, we were let into the camp because we were looking young, strong enough for the Nazis to work for. Our job was to work for the IG farm industry, which is a company as big as Boeing. They produced poison gas, synthetic rubber. They had an invention for second-class gasoline, which worked pretty good in the German tanks, and made it work there like animals. But before they let us work, when we arrived in the camp, they shouted at us as put your suitcase on one side, your backpack on one side, your rings on one side, your watches. The only thing we could keep were our glasses to work. And in no time, you saw piles of rings and watches and wallets, and a suitcase, of course. And after this came another commando. They shaved our heads, like they did for the women too, I found out later on. Shaved us all over. And then came another crew, and everybody who arrived in Auschwitz received a tattoo on the left forearm with a new number. The Nazis didn't want to fool around with names anymore, because there were hundreds of thousands of prisoners. Maybe somebody had the same name like I have, so they gave everybody a number, which was much easier. Now, in Auschwitz, there were many other prisoners besides the Jewish people. There were the gypsies, homosexuals, Jehovah's Witnesses, communists, of course, and criminals, political. And how can we identify the different groups? Especially, how can we identify the Jewish people? And the Nazis are very clever. What they did, after we received our tattoo, they put the same number from the arm on the jacket. And what they did, and to sort everybody out, everybody got a triangle with a certain color above the number. For instance, gypsies, they got a black triangle above the number to identify the people as gypsies. Political, they got a red triangle like a communist. Homosexuals got a pink triangle. Jehovah's Witnesses, priests got a purple triangle. And everybody a triangle, and the Jews, finally, what they did, they used the yellow triangle from the stars we had to wear in the city before we were deported, and took the yellow little triangle from the Star of David and put it on top of our number. So in the morning, when it came to roll call, they looked over the people with the different triangles, and the ones like us with a yellow triangle, we got the toughest job, the hardest job, because the idea was work all the Jews, all the people with the yellow triangle, work them to death. That's what we want. Sure, the other people should be punished, but those people we want to get rid of. So the Nazis didn't have enough power, not enough men to watch us, so they took the criminals with the green triangle. Some had a life sentence. They told them, okay, we need some help. Now you know how to treat people, mostly anti-Semites. You take over when we are short on help. We have to go send people to the front. You take over and make those Jews work like heck. The better, the harder, the better. And those people, fellow inmates, were many times worse than the Nazis because they want to make themselves a good name. When somebody collapsed and died on the job, they went to the Nazis, hey, we killed another Jew. Oh, good for you. When the war is over, Hitler, of course, is going to win. You don't have to finish your sentence. You can go back home to your family, never mind what you did. And they were really mean, but whatever they could. Now a day in camp started 5:30 in the morning. 6 o'clock, they give you so-called breakfast. Piece of dry bread, once a week, spoonful jam, marmalade, and some burnt corn, that they call that coffee. And then you appear for roll call. You march out, work for 6 hours. You get a plateful soup of that plateful of that watery soup with rotten potatoes in, or leftover vegetable, maybe from the Nazi guards, or potato peels, anything just to put something in. And you work another 6 hours, and you march back to the camp. And if anybody was missing, and then in the morning, let's say 4,000 or 5,000 people, and in the daytime somebody didn't want to live anymore, committed suicide, all you had to do, touch the electrified fence, and you are dead. That's what the Nazis wanted anyhow. This way they got rid of the Jewish people. But in the night time for roll call, 2 guys had to carry the dead bodies for roll call. Whatever happened to the people that were shot, and the commandant wanted to have the same amount in the evening like the people left in the morning. That was the rule. And sometimes we stayed there in winter time in the rain or in the snow for hours until they found all the dead bodies. And summertime, of course, when it was hot, we had to wait there. So sometimes we arrived home in the barracks 8, 9 o'clock in the evening. So we left in the morning 7, worked 12 hours, and then at 2 hours maybe roll call to find all the dead bodies. Now I had a very good friend, met on a farm already. This man was 6'5" maybe, 220 pounds, really a giant. And he was so big and strong. On a farm for exercise, he took a 100-pound bag of corn or flour, threw it in the air, caught it again. He had a big, that was fun for him. But when he went into the camp and the Nazis saw how big and strong the guy was, they gave him the toughest job, like carrying cement bags, heavy beams. And Paul lasted about 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks. He was the strongest of the whole bunch of us. But he collapsed because this man, 6'5", strong like a bull, he couldn't live on a lousy food ration, dry bread, 2 platefuls of soup a day. He was the first victim. When we came into the camp, there was a terrible stench, and the chimneys were going day and night. So we asked our fellow inmates, say, buddy, what's going on here? There's smell and stinks here, and stench, and the chimney's going. And we were told, don't ask any dumb question, find out for yourself. It didn't take us too long to find out. The stench came, the people working in the crematoria, they had about 60 ovens, they couldn't keep up with all the people being gassed. So if they couldn't keep up, there was a bunch of people, they took the dead bodies and stuck up those dead corpses against the wall. And after 2 or 3 days, of course, they start smelling like heck, and that was a terrible stench. And of course, the chimneys were going day and night because there were crews. They worked in 8-hour shifts, 24 hours around the clock. Their job was pick up the dead bodies, put them on the bar in the ovens, shove the dead bodies in, pull out again, back and forth for 8 hours. That was the job. I was ordered to work in a cable commando. That means dig trenches 50 feet long, 5 to 6 feet deep, put the cables in, those big cables, cover them up with bricks, fill them up with sand again. After we were done, hurry up, there were the Nazis and those green triangle prisoners. They pushed us and beat us, and you start another 50 feet digging trenches and so on. And you do that, it's a tough job even in normal way, but with food we got, who could live on that? So in order to find out who is well enough to do all that hard work and who is not able to do 100% the job anymore, they had every 6 weeks or so the so-called selection. Everybody was afraid of the selection. That meant the head doctor came from the main camp with a commission of people, and after you, like I say, work 12 hours, stay 2 hours for roll call, and finally you go back to the barracks, get your plate full of soup. So after 14, 15 hours, always on a run, you have to strip naked in front of the commission, and if you weren't able to walk fast enough, marched left, right, they took your number from your arm or from the jacket, and you were written up, and next morning after roll call, that meant the end of you. There were some prisoners, they came to us, they couldn't understand German. What does it mean to be written up? Oh, we had a bittersweet joke going between us. Oh, tomorrow you go to the Sky Commando. Sky Commando, what's that for commando? Come on, don't ask any dumb question. You can work for the Nazis anymore, 100%. I might as well tell you, they do either shoot you or gas you, and they put your body in a crematoria, and you go up in smoke. You go up to the skies. That is your new commando for tomorrow. It was just a bittersweet joke, just to keep us going. In April and Christmas, in December 1943, around Christmas, 4 men tried to escape, and they were brought back to the camp. And on Christmas Day, it was either 5 above or 5 below. And here we were standing in our thin uniforms for hours in attention. And the commandant came, the gallows were already ready to hang those people. He said, I tell you one thing, there's no way for any of you guys to escape. The only way to escape is to the chimneys. That means either being shot or gassed, and your body goes up to the chimney, to the skies. That's the only way for you. So after we heard this, we were discouraged. There's no use to escape. They bring you back anyhow, and we might as well hope from day to day to make it. We had one man in our commando. He spoke very good English. Once in a while we had some Canadian prisoners of war working near us. So when nobody was around, he went to the prisoners and, hey buddy, what's going on? For instance, we are told some general tried to kill Hitler. I think it was in the beginning of 1944. Of course, it didn't work. The bomb went off, and the table where Hitler was standing was a heavy oak plate, and he got only hurt slightly on the arm. But those generals and all the people who helped and tried to kill Hitler, everybody was killed within 24 hours. So that didn't work. We still were in a camp. And later on, they told us the invasion started 1944 in June 1944, and that gave us a little hope. We said, well, those are good troops. They come to Germany within 6 weeks. Of course, it took almost a year before we were liberated, but it gave us some hope. By the fall of 1944, I got weaker and weaker, and I just felt that something couldn't happen to me. You know, when I went into the camp, my weight was about 165 pounds. And the first time I went on the scale after liberation, I was down to 96 pounds. We just were walking skeletons. Anyhow, we had those terrible selections again one night, and I didn't turn fast enough, and I didn't march fast enough, and my number was written up. Here come all my friends and inmates. Sorry, I wish you would hold out another few weeks. The Americans are coming, the Russians are coming. Too bad you have to go. I say, don't give me any soft talk here. I know what's going to happen. Nice to meet you, and too bad. But then something funny happened to us. From all the lousy nourishment we got, food we got. Some of us woke up in the morning with water in the arms, swollen arms. Some had swollen legs. Some woke up with swollen bellies, and I woke up every morning with a bloated face, like this. That lasted about for an hour, 2 hours. And then the next morning, a roll call came. Of course, my number was called up. Everybody marched out to work, and those people were called by number. We had to go to a certain spot. There were about 75 to 100 people waiting for their fate, and I was one of the taller ones. And here comes the SS guard, looked us over, and he sees me way in the back and shouted at me, "Hey, you with your big fat face, don't you know what that means to be in that group?" I played kind of dumb. He said, "No, sir." "Hey, you look good enough to us. You can do another 3 days' work. Get going, otherwise I report your number to the high command. You will be punished." Punishment in a camp, besides being gassed, meant 10 lashes over your behind. Of course, after you get 3, 4 lashes, you are half dead anyhow. The next day you are dead. So I ran with all the strength I had. I ran back into the barrack. And here, the guy in charge of the barrack, of course, one of those criminals, hating the Jewish people anyhow, he said, "How in the heck did you make it? Anybody written up? And you shouldn't be anymore. You should be dead. How in the heck did you make it?" And he looked me over. He said, "You know what? You fooled that SS man. He saw only your face. He figured you look so pretty good in your face. You have a big face. You look good all over your body. Boy, are you lucky. You just made it. Go back, go and hide underneath the bed, and everybody comes home. Otherwise, we're both going to get it." In the evening, my friends came back from work. Everybody looked at me. "Boy, that's a miracle. How did you make it?" Of course, in the evening, I looked like anybody else, pale, walking skeleton. In fact, in the camps, they called us Muslim, half-dead creatures. Next morning, of course, I woke up with my swollen, bloated face again, and after 2 hours, I looked like anybody else, and I went to work as good as I could. But I said to myself, another 6, 8 weeks, if we have another selection, I'm not going to make it. Swollen face or not, I can hardly walk. But then in January 1945, we heard the sound of the cannons, artillery from the Russian army coming closer and closer to Auschwitz. And the Nazis were frantic. What can we do for 100,000 of Jewish people and other people? We can gas them all. We want to erase any trace what we do to the Jewish and other people. So they decided to put us on a march, so-called death march. On the 18th of January 45, the siren went all over the camp. The loudspeakers, anybody for roll call, if you have a blanket, bring your blanket along. And you're going to march to the next camp, something like from here, like Spokane. Now, you have to understand, bitter cold, 5 above or 5 below. Here we, in our same uniforms, they took our good shoes away and gave us canvas shoes with those thick wooden soles. Now you try to march over the icy highway. So we marched as good as we could, and when somebody broke down, either slipped or couldn't walk anymore, the Nazis said, "Get those guys out of the road. We don't want to stop the march for a few lousy dogs like you." So we had to hand those people out. Here came the SS, I saw with my own eyes, gun and shot the guy in the neck. Other guy went to the next town or city, to the mayor, "Get rid of all those dead bodies. We don't want to see the Russian, what we did." So we were about 16,000 men from our department, and after the war I found out of the 16,000, 2,500 to 3,000 made it alive, were liberated because some people froze to death, starved to death, were shot. Every day something happens. So we arrived in the first concentration camp, and the commandant said, "I don't want you guys. I have no room for you. I have no food for you. Get going." So the next morning, they put us in empty cattle cars, 80 men to one cattle car, standing, of course, and they told us, "We ship your guys to Austria, to the biggest camp in Mauthausen. So I took a 2-day trip to Mauthausen. The commandant in Mauthausen said, I have no room for you, get going. So they shipped us back and forth on the empty cattle cars in the cold for 10 days without any food. Once in a while, the Nazis took a loaf of bread, threw it in a cattle car, and we were fighting like a bunch of animals, and they had a good time. Look at those guys fighting. Now, if I tell you 10 days, some people will say, well, the guy made up a story. But you remember 2 or 3 years ago, Scott O'Grady, the American Air Force man, he hid in Bosnia for 7, 8, or 9 days, and that man lived on barks and on leaves or anything he could find, and he was later on, after 8 days, he was liberated by his buddies in Bosnia. Certain time you are lucky, but we did. It was always snowing like mad. We ate the snow, and we knocked off the icicle from the cattle car, and we are living really for 10 days on ice and snow. Of course, in all that cold and fighting for a piece of this and crumbs of bread or an icicle, people tumbled each other down. All of a sudden, they were out of 80, 70, 65, 50, 45, 35. And when somebody died inside the cattle car, the Nazis called, take those bodies, throw them over the wall of the cattle cars, get going. But before we throw the dead bodies over the cattle car, we undressed those people. We took the jacket off, put on 2 or 3 jackets or 2 pair of pants, or exchanged shoes because we were cold. Listen, we had only the thin uniform. And then we throw the dead bodies over the cattle car, over the wall of the cattle car. When we arrived in the first camp, that was Sachsenhausen, near Berlin, the commandant said, well, you can stay with us for 3 days, but I have no beds for you and only little food. And they let us sleep on a cement floor somewhere in an empty hall. And then we marched again from here to, 40 miles to the next camp. And in that camp, I remember they had no gas ovens and no gas chambers. That camp was made on 2 terraces. The one part was 100, 200 feet higher than the lower part, and get rid of the people, the prisoners, they just tossed those people from way up high into the lower part of the camp. That's the way they killed the people over there. And in that camp named Flossenburg, there was one of those nasty green triangle men in charge of the barracks, and he had something against, especially against the Hungarian young men. He told them, strip naked, get out, wait out in the cold for 20 minutes, come on back, take a cold shower, go out again. After 3 or 4 times, that man collapsed, died, and that guy took the jacket off, went to the front office, hey, I killed another Jew. Good for you, you're a good citizen. When Hitler wins the war, you can go back to your family. They made a game out of it. Who can kill the fellow inmates? Who can kill more people than another one? Then I came to another camp and I met another man from Berlin. And he must have recognized my accent from Berlin. He said, you know, I know you're from Berlin, aren't you? Yes. How about, would you like to get a double ration of bread? Oh, heck, sure, I would like a double ration of bread. I like to do anything to survive. What's the job? Okay, tomorrow morning I'm going to show you. So in the morning, after we get up, had that lousy breakfast, the other guy and myself, we had to go from one barrack to another one and pick up the dead bodies, the dead prisoners who died overnight, stripped them naked, took the jacket to the front office, and the Nazis wrote the numbers off from the people who died overnight, and we threw the dead bodies on a pile, and for this I received a double ration of bread. Now roll call was away about 5 minutes. I had no time to go and wash my hands. With the same dirty hands, I just picked up 25, 30 dead bodies. I had to eat my bread in a hurry, because you were not allowed to eat during roll call. Today, if somebody would tell me, pick up that dead dog, here's a piece of bread, I would say, forget about that piece of bread. I pick up the dog, put the dog away, and then at least wash my hands. But at that time, you had no time. You were like a machine. Do this, do that. If you don't follow, you write your number up, you will be punished or hit over your head. We were just about a number, that's all in the eyes of the Nazis. So I marched out with anybody else. It was already April. And the first few weeks we had to do work on a train station that was a very important a connection to Munich, the train station Munich, Augsburg, and so on. And the English and American came every night and bombed the station, and we had to straighten out the tracks the next day and remove the rocks and so on. We marched every day with the dogs and with the Nazi guards into the city. Of course, when the war ended, everybody said, oh, we didn't know there was a camp nearby. So we marched every day and worked. But in the middle of April, I got weaker and weaker, and my goodness, I couldn't march anymore all the way. So what I did, I saw on the way to work an empty foxhole, and I threw myself in an empty foxhole, and I stayed all day hiding in that foxhole. Of course, I didn't get my soup at lunchtime, and on the way back, I joined the marchers and went back to the camp. At least when my number was called, I could report I'm there. But I got weaker and weaker, dizzy, loss of weight, high temperature, and I contracted typhus fever, hunger typhus, about the same thing. It's a terrible sickness. You lose more and more weight, you're dizzy, you're deaf, and I was worried, what shall I do? Shall I report sick or not? In Auschwitz at the time, when you report sick and you couldn't go to work after 3 days, the guy in charge of the infirmary report your number and they pick you right up from the infirmary and kill you. So I decided, should I go, should I not go? But I was so dead sick, I said, heck with it, I report to the infirmary, I can't walk anymore. So I went to the infirmary, the guy in charge said, well, I got only one bed for 3 other guys. You can join that, that's all you can do. So they put me in a bed, 4 guys in one bed, 2 guys this way, 2 guys that way, and here we were waiting to die. There was no medication for anything. If you were thirsty, they brought you some water. There was no anything you could think of, Tylenol or what you want. They had nothing. All you do there, either you die or you make it. So we were laying there, delirious, for 2-3 days. And all of a sudden, one day, on the 2nd of May, the guy next to me says, say, buddy, I hear some funny noise. I hear some strange language. I said, oh, you're just dreaming. You're delirious. You're as sick as I am. Forget about it, you and your dreams. I heard about Hitler being killed. It didn't work. I heard about Normandy invasion. Where are the guys? Nobody cares for us anymore. Just forget about it. But what happened, the American army, they came 2 or 3 days earlier than the Nazis expected them, and they surrounded the city and came closer and closer to the camp. And when they came close enough, the Nazis took off in a motorbike. Every guard had a motorbike at that time. They called a few guards. And here the fighting men who fought against Hitler for years, they came into the infirmary, and when they saw us laying there, half dead, pleading, some people plead with them, please don't shoot us, we didn't do anything. All we were Jewish, that's all, we didn't do anything against anybody. And they came and looked at us, and those fighting men, they were crying like little kids. They couldn't understand how educated people, like the German people, they are one of the best educated people in Europe, how could they do that to a fellow man? Let people starve to death, killing, whatever happened. And they went from one bed to another one. Say, buddy, you're free now. What do you want? Meat, bean soup, chocolate, nuts, you name it. They came to my bed. Hey, buddy, you're free. What do you want? I say, I'm burning up. I got 103, 104 temperature. Please bring me something to drink. So they came and brought me orange juice, apple juice, water, anything I wanted. And those fellow inmates who asked for bean soup and meat and heavy stuff, some of them died after 3-4 days. How can your system take, of a sudden, after years, without getting any good food, take that heavy bean soup and meat? They just died like flies. I was lucky enough I couldn't eat anything because I was always thirsty due to the high temperature. So they took us to a nearby Catholic hospital, and the army doctors and the Catholic, the nuns, They helped us in any way they could, and took about 6 to 8 weeks to get me back to normal. I regained my hearing again. I could walk again after not to back to normal. And the first chance I had, I told some of my buddies, why don't we go to town, about 20 minutes walk, and let's see how it feels to be free walking to the town. So we were a bunch of guys walking downhill to the town, and when some people saw us still in our striped uniform, they pointed a finger at us, saying, look at that, there's still some Jews alive. I thought Hitler killed everybody. Hitler didn't do 100% good job. They're still alive, those darn Jews. And when I heard that, most of the people didn't understand. They were Polish or Russian prisoners. I explained to everybody what just came out. I said to them, you know, those darn people are still full of hate. We didn't do nothing. They still blame us. Now they blame us for losing the war. The first chance I have, I want to get out of Germany. So the other guys took off. Some people left for Sweden, some back to Holland, Belgium, France, some to Palestine at the time. But I couldn't go away because when we were separated, I told my wife, whenever we make it, let's meet in your hometown. I came from Berlin, a city of 4 million people. I never would find my wife in a big city of Berlin. But my wife came from a small hometown, 35, 40,000 people. So we agreed that's the only place we ever would find each other. So postal service, there was no postal service, no trains, no buses. I had to walk from one city to another one. But before I took off, I took a piece of paper, and with pencil I wrote, honey, I'm still alive, I made it, just wait for me. And I gave that to a homecoming soldier. I asked him, which direction you go? I go to Munich. Okay, you take that letter to Munich and give it to somebody who walks towards Nuremberg, Augsburg. And that letter went from hand to hand, and after 3-4 weeks or more, my wife got the note. She couldn't even see what I wrote. The only thing she could see my handwriting, and she waited, of course, didn't move to another city. So a trip normally would take about 5-6 hours to go to the city of my wife. It took me almost 2 weeks. I walked from one city to another one. When I came to a river, I had to wait for somebody to take me over by boat because the Nazis bombed all the bridges all over Germany to make it tough for the invading army, Allied armies. So I fought my way every day somewhere else, slept every day somewhere else. And after about 2 weeks, I came to the hometown of my wife, and here we met the first time in 28 months. My wife didn't know I was alive, I didn't know she was alive, but we both made it. We had about 10 or 12 couples on a farm, and we and another couple were the only ones that both made it. Most of them, either husband died, or the wife died, or both died. So here we were in a Russian zone, and we found the Russians were pretty good to us. They hated the German people, so when they found out we are survivors, we had a striped uniform and the numbers, they gave us double ration of food, and the Nazis hated us again. Look at the Jews get double ration and we get nothing, but the army said, the heck with you guys, we lost more people than anybody else. So we were there for a few months, and then we found out that President Truman released a special quota to let about 100,000 survivors come to the United States. But you have to be in the Bavarian zone, in the American zone. And we were still in the Russian zone. What are we going to do? So we decided one day we sneak over the border in order to get to America. Now when we were in the Russian zone, we learned a few Russian words, like, for instance, tovarish is friend, comrade, Jevray is Jew. So when the Russian soldiers came and asked us something, we said, tovarish, Jevray, we are Jewish. Comrade, we are Jewish. But the 2 or 3 words, dobra, good, da, is yes. But the German people learned those words too. And on the day when we decided to cross the border, there were a whole bunch of Germans with us. And the people living near the border told us, I tell you right now, those border guards, they are tough, they're ready to shoot. they warn you 2 times, stop. And if you don't stop, they shoot. Okay, so midnight, we went with a bunch of other people, tried to go over the border, and after a short time, we heard a call from one of the Russian border guards, "Stoi!" And we kept on running. They don't mean us, heck with it. We kept on running, and here came the second commando, "Stoi!" And then I told my wife, "Look here, we survived the Nazis' death camp. I don't want to be shot by a Russian border guard. Let's surrender. Let's go to the commandant." So they took a bunch of us, 10, 12 people, before the commandant, the Russian commandant. And here was a young boy soldier, 16, 18, just a young kid. He went to the commandant and whispered something in the commandant's ear. And the commandant said, "Dobra, very good, dobra." So he went to one after another, to the German guys first. "Oh, you're Yevray. Tovarishch Yevray? Oh yeah, Yevray. Can you say a Jewish prayer?" "No, what's a Jewish prayer?" "Commandant, he's not Jewish." They went from one place to another one, and when they came to us, to my wife and myself, "Can you say a Jewish prayer?" "Sure, we were brought up as Jewish people. Sure, we were suffering in the camp. Sure, you want to hear?" And we said a Jewish prayer, and the commandant, he went to the commandant, he said, "Those two are the only Jevrays, only Jews. So the other ones, they're all Nazis." And the commandant said, "Back where you came from. Back. You might as well suffer like anybody else." And the commandant asked us, "Why do you want to leave the Russian zone?" So we told the guy, "You know, the Russian zone is so good to us. We want to pick up our parents from the American zone, and we want to bring those parents to the Russian zone." That was a nice lie, wasn't it? Just to get out. "Okay," he said, "Dobra, good. Come back." Within 24 hours, sir. We never came back. Who wants to go back to the Russians? You know? So anyhow, we went to Fürth, Nuremberg. That's the birthplace of Henry Kissinger. And I worked there for the Jewish congregation, and it took us about 9 months to file papers. And in October 1946, we got our papers and we came over to the United States. I stayed first in New York, and then we came over to Seattle because I had an uncle, he was a doctor in Seattle, and I had a great aunt and great uncle in Butte, Montana. If it wouldn't be for my uncle in Seattle, maybe I would have landed in Butte, Montana, because I had relatives there. Of course, they died in the meantime. So I came to Seattle. I worked for 36 years for a big bakery. They had bakeries down the West Coast, Langendorf. I don't know anybody knows the name, Langendorf. We made cake, cookies, bread. And I worked there for 36 years, and I was happy with my job. And we, like my wife and I and other survivors, we appreciate life much more than anybody else born here. Because here you take everything for granted. You want your food, your new coat, this. Here, we know what it meant to be certain second-class citizen, slave, labor, almost getting killed. We appreciate life much more than anybody else. But before I close, I want to give you a message. There were very few people on our side or speaking up against Hitler. There were, for instance, a well-known Lutheran minister, Martin Niemöller. When Hitler came to power, from the first day on, he talked every Sunday morning how bad Hitler was, and what it means to have a man like dictator like this running the country, getting into another war, a man who tried to kill minorities, Jews and other minorities is no good according to the law. And every Monday morning, the Nazis came and put that man into jail. Next Sunday morning, he started telling the people the same thing. And after a few weeks, the Nazis got so fed up with that minister, they took him to Dachau, and that man was sitting in Dachau for 8 years, from 37 to 45, with other Jewish and other prisoners. And when he was liberated the same day, or at that time like I was, by the American army, the man was much older than we were, sick already, and he died after a few years, after freedom, after he was liberated. But this man left a message which is still good today, saying, In Germany, the Nazis came first for the communists. And I didn't speak up because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the Jews. And I wasn't a Jew. I didn't speak up for the Jews. Then they came for the trade unionists. Hitler didn't like the unions. I didn't speak up for the trade unionists because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for the Catholics. I didn't speak up for the Catholics because I was a Protestant. And finally, they came for me, and there was nobody to stand up for me or speak up for me. What he meant to say, there are some groups we have here, too bad, starting again all over the nation, neo-Nazis, skinheads. They attack African Americans, homosexuals, Hispanics, and other group. I understand here the same people sometimes happen here with Indian people. So what he meant to say, you think you are white, nothing concerns you. After all, Hitler didn't mean you. You are white people. But Hitler even divided the people in Germany, all white people. We didn't have any African Americans in Germany. Maybe it's in a city with university, some students or teachers. We didn't have any Hispanics, any other people, any group in Germany. They were all white people. But Hitler even divided the white people. He said the Jews are no good, the Gypsies are no good, the Catholics are no good, the Jehovah's Witnesses are no good. Everybody was no good. The only group was good was the German, blonde, blue-eyed citizen, the women and the men, the future of Germany. The rest is no good. And with all the division he did, he slipped in with about 17 million votes in 1933, which is about like a president would win with 28 or 30% of the votes. Because every group was no good. The Nazis were fighting with the communists and the veterans and the Democrats and every different groups, and he just slipped in. If he would be a little bit stronger and stuck together, Hitler never would have made it. And I always say, there's only one race, and that's a human race. And if we can work it out or stick up for each other, that's too bad. If we don't respect each other, white, any color, white, black, green, blue, whatever you want, we have no rights anymore. And I hope when the kids, and most of the time I speak in high school, when they are ready to vote, to be sure and vote for the right people. I take only one bad man like Hitler, he has changed the whole country. Hitler not only killed 6 million Jewish people, 1.5 million innocent little children, he also killed 5 to 6 million good Christians, people who tried to help Jewish people or fought, or the Jehovah's Witnesses who didn't agree with his politics. And not only this, he got about 52 million people fighting it and killing each other all over Europe because Hitler was going to take over all Europe. So let us be a lesson. For instance, there's a man 2 or 3 years ago, David Duke, he tried to run for senator. He had the same idea like Hitler, dictatorship. If we get people like this running the country, the same thing could happen again. Never say it won't happen again. It takes one bad apple to spoil the whole rest of the box. Thank you for listening. If anybody has some questions, I'm very willing to answer some questions. There was some question coming up. Would be interesting to have your question. Yes.
I'd like to ask you what happened. How did your friends, non-Jewish friends, react to what happened in 1935, from 35 to 38? How did they react?
Good question. There's a famous writer, Elie Wiesel. Some might know the name Elie Wiesel. He wrote the first book, Night. And he writes in his book, the bystanders are as bad as the perpetrators, saying, when you live in a certain part of the city and you live together with your neighbors for 30, 40 years and so, and you see the Nazis like you're picking up a Jewish couple for nothing, and you watch and do nothing about it and try to protect your neighbor, you're as guilty as the Nazis. So there are many people, they try to help the Jews, but they were afraid to do anything. They might lose their business. But Hitler found a way to brainwash everybody. even if they weren't 100% sure the Jews did something bad, Hitler found a way. For instance, the old story was always that the Jews killed Jesus Christ. And he said, when they said, well, look at this, here's a bunch of people we have in Germany. Those are the people who killed the great-grandparents, they killed Jesus Christ. And some people, even if they were anti-Semites, they got some message like this, well, the Jews must have something, do something to be guilty, and they picked up the people and there was no resistance. They were afraid, some didn't care, and the rest went along with Hitler because they were brainwashed. So it's about all I can tell you.
So, you mean friends that you knew, like you'd go to dinner with, just left you alone then?
I like my good friend Walter, my closest friend. He left me alone because he had to join the Hitler Youth. And as soon as you joined the Hitler Youth, you were brainwashed. The only good people are the German people. Now you're a young man, you will be a good soldier. Don't play with Jewish boys and girls, forget everything. And that was the message. And all you could see on television, how Jews looked. For instance, they took some rabbi with a beard, showed the people on television, that is a spy, look how he looks. And they took the beard off next day, and that's the man he really looks. He has put a beard on in order to spy against Germany. All those things they saw, and after a while, well, some people said there must be something to it, and they forget to stand up for Jewish people. Yeah? Yes? No.
It's obvious from looking at the history of this century, Cambodia, East Timor, currently Yugoslavia, and so forth, that virtually anyone's capable of committing genocide. I guess my question would be, however, is there something peculiar to German character, perhaps particularly in 1930, since you were German and grew up there, that limited Germany in that era to do so in a way?
You know, when the war started in Bosnia, another survivor and myself, we were asked by the same channel who made that video to come and tell them what we think about how people are suffering in Bosnia. You saw those pictures of men standing there behind barbed wire in the camps. And what we think about it. So we told them, when we were in Hitler's death camp, nobody did anything for us because they said, well, we don't know what Hitler does with the Jewish people. We didn't know anything about it here in the United States, or pretend they didn't know. Roosevelt and Churchill and those head of the countries, they know exactly what happened, but didn't do much about it anyhow. But when we came to this country, we told the world what happened in the Hitler years between 33 and 45. Now, after you know what happened to us, there's no way out that you say you don't understand and don't know what happened in Bosnia. As the same thing happened in Bosnia in some way that the Nazis did with us. And if America doesn't step in and does something about it, which it did later on, of course, the same thing is going to happen to those innocent men, women, children in Bosnia. Of course, we were always concerned, how come the big powers like Germany, England, France, they're much closer to Bosnia than we were, than America is. How come they don't do anything about it? And that's the only thing we said, do something before another thing happened, genocide like in Cambodia, Rwanda. So we know what happened, and I hope the people learn something from our talks. And of course, the United States sent some troops in, and it's coming and going like this. That's all we can do, tell them what happened to us in order to prevent another death sentence or death killing program like Hitler did with us.
So it sounds like what you're saying is there isn't anything unique about Germany in 1930 that couldn't happen here or anywhere else.
It could happen. You're saying it could happen again. I think when we came, our own relatives said, oh, you went to a terrible time, forget about it. It's never can happen again. It can happen again. It takes one crazy man. Hitler, the man who was even born in Germany, he was born in a little town in Austria. He took over with 25 people. He started in 1923 or 25. Look what he did. It takes one bad person to be elected, and you get a bunch of people helping out, and the same thing could happen again. You had some groups, neo-Nazis, skinheads, they start here, they go pretty powerful against the people in Germany again, killing Turkish people, people who helped building up Germany after the war. It doesn't take long. One bunch of bad people could change the whole thing. And we have to watch out who we are going to elect. Yes, ma'am.
Do you think that sometimes argued, sometimes contended, that the average German citizen actually knew what was really going on, Hitler and his deputies were really doing? Or do you think that they were largely ignorant?
You're saying the average person didn't know what happened? Or what?
At the time, yeah, the average German citizen at the time actually know what was going on? Or
Well, you know,
what his deputies were actually doing, or did they really believe the
now you know,
propaganda that Nazis were bringing out?
we were told, like anybody else, we were told in the East they built labor camps, and everybody had to work for the war effort. The Nazis never put a gas chamber inside Germany because I think the average German citizen, as bad as they were against us later on, the Nazis, they wouldn't allow the Nazis to build a death camp or gas chambers inside Germany. So when they took people away and telling them where we need people in the eastern part of Poland, some people believed, well, it's a labor camp, we have to do something. And when people know little by little, for instance, when we are deported, we got less food rations like anybody else. For instance, I worked on a farm. We had about 3,000 chickens. We got 1 egg a week and a quarter of a pound sugar all months, no candies. So when we were shipped to the east, evacuated, they call us, we were told you have to work hard. We got less food ration than anybody else, but we never could figure out they're going to kill us. Sure, and the German people were told, well, we ship the Jews, we don't want one of the Jews, we send the German borders, they could help the enemies, we send them to the east for labor camps. The real story coming about the death camps came out in the later part, in let's say 41, 42, 43. But in the first years, when you start building those camps, nobody, even us, couldn't believe there's some camps, all they do is gassing people. So people know something being built in the east, or even the camps inside Germany. Those were camps to punish people, but nobody would ever think of killing people. Even we didn't believe it, that something like this is possible. Yes, ma'am.
Did you ever find your sister?
My sister, no. I went 1993. I went to Washington, D.C. to the Holocaust Museum. And there was a book about 10 to 12 inches high, no kidding. It was all the names of people who got killed in the camp. You know, the Nazis are so crazy. They had a register, and they put everybody's names when the person was born, when they picked up the person, in which camp the person went. And I looked through the papers, through the pages, and I found the name of my dad, born that day, left, deported from Berlin on that day, and I saw some Russian or Polish name camp. My mother, same, that and that day, deported. My sister, some in a Russian camp, ended in a Russian camp, some ended in a Polish camp. I never saw my sister again. So it's really crazy. And when the Russian came to Auschwitz, they didn't have time to burn the papers or all the files from everybody. So then the Russians came and the Americans came to Dachau. They took those papers and collected the papers and sent most of the papers to the Den Haag first and later on to the different countries. But if it wouldn't be for those files, nobody would know what happened to the people. But it's there. If you want to see it, you can just go up to Washington, D.C. anytime you want to look. And then when the English army came, the occupation army, they had a city, a small city in the English zone, Errolson, that was a resort, and they had a list of all people who survived. And we looked over the list. I never saw my parents, my sister's name. My wife never saw the name of her family. So they released the list. Now the Red Cross does the same thing. They print a list of people who died. So that's the only thing we know, that our parents didn't make it.
Did you ever...
I was wondering about the very young children that went to the camps. The very young children, what happened to them? Were any of them still able to survive, or were they all?
You know, the first children who came to the camp, if they looked kind of weak, they put them right away. If a mother came with the children at the time, The Nazis took the mother with the children right to the gas chambers because they figured the mother's too much attached to the children, and the mother wouldn't do a good job, always worry about the children. I had to take the mothers and the children right with the older people to the gas chambers. Later, but if you had, for instance, I had once a group in a center in Seattle. There were a teacher, she came with some boys, and I asked the teacher, how old are the boys? The boys were 12, 13 years old, and they looked like 16, 17. Those kids would have made it. But there were some 13, 14-year-old kids, small, they just put them away. But some kids were born in some different camps, and they made it. There were some 4 or 5-year-old kids, 8-year-old kids. They were born inside a camp and were hiding in a camp. Somehow the mother hit the kids and they survived. It was just of course, Hitler had a whole bunch of kids, especially twins in Auschwitz, to make some experience on those kids. And when the Russians came, those kids survived too. It was a whole bunch of kids. There was, for instance, a story when the American army came to one of the camps to Buchenwald. They went from one barrack to another one, and in one barrack they heard some noise, and here was an 8-year-old boy hiding behind a bed. And a soldier said to the kid, come on, come out, whoever it is, you're free now. And here comes the 8-year-old boy out, and he just told him, you're free now, don't worry anymore. How old are you, my boy? And the young boy said, I'm older than you are. Come on, the soldier said, how can you be older than, I'm a grown-up man, you're just a kid. He said, yes, you might be grown up, but I don't know how to cry and how to laugh. I had no use. I must be an old man by now. I don't know what it means to be happy or sad. I must be older than you, because I never had that. One of those kid stories, you know. So the kids had no use like us. We had no good time. When we were 13, 14, we couldn't go to the movies, we couldn't go to the sport events. So the kids had a terrible time. And some kids, in fact, the director of the Anti-Defamation League in New York, he was a 5-year-old boy, and when the parents were taken to the camp, they gave that boy to a nun to hide the child. And after the war, that nun didn't want to give the kid back to the parents. Both parents survived somehow. And the parents had to go to court to get their kid back. The nun told the judge, where were the parents when the kid was sick, when they had measles? I was a mother, like a mother to the kid. And the judge said, whatever you did was very noble, very nice, but those are the real parents. Give that kid back. They had a big fight to get their own kid back. Many people hit their children and they came after the war back to the parents.
Klaus, one more question.
Okay.
Then you need to go to bed for a big day tomorrow.
Big day tomorrow. You know, according to my time, it's only 5 to 8, you know. Seattle time, 5 to 8. Okay, what's the last question? Oh, you had one before? I don't know. Okay.
I assisted Mount House twice, and I was in Dachau once.
Yes.
After the war. But I just want to make a kind of supportive speech for people that have done something against the Germans. I lived in Holland during the war, and I've seen people being loaded in petty cars. I have seen razzias in Holland. If a person knows what a razzia means, that is really something else. They close up the town and comb all the men out of the town and take them to Germany.
Yeah.
I mean, that gives a big boost to the people that want to support the German effort.
Yes. See what happened? I talked once to a man, he's the president of the Anne Frank House in Amsterdam. And he was very unhappy. In France, about 40% of the people taken to the camp came back. In Belgium, it's about the same amount. And in Holland, only 30 to 35% came back alive. And they want to know why. What the Nazis did when they took over Holland, see, in Germany, everybody was registered with the police. When you move from one place to another one, from one apartment to another one, you have to go to the police and fill out a form, name, move from one apartment to another one, from one street to another one. And when the Nazis took over Holland, they introduced the same thing in Holland. So the Nazis had everybody's address when they came to pick up people. They just went from one home to another one and took the people to the camp. And the man was very unhappy because in Holland were good people. Many people protected the Jewish people. And he was very unhappy that the Nazis took that many people and only so few came back alive. But like I say, the Nazis found a way to grab anybody. First he brought them to Westerbork, right? Westerbork first, to collect the people, and then from Westerbork to Auschwitz. Yeah, Holland had good people, but they still couldn't do. The army was too mighty to.
It also happened that there was a parliament, and out of 100 members of parliament, 5 members were supporting the German government. None of the German government.
Well, if you,
they were sympathizing with the German government.
You know, when you want to really go, really like to talk supporting, you know, the other day or some months ago, I saw the story of the Edward V, or whatever it was, when he married Mrs. Simpson. Remember? And he couldn't be king anymore. You know, it was really, I thought about it, was kind of a fate. If Bevin was the prime minister at the time, if King Edward would be allowed to stay being king, King Edward, like Lindbergh here in the United States, were big friends with Hitler. If he would be elected king and would be king during the wartime, he would have made somehow agreement with Hitler, and Hitler could put all his power against the Russians or Poland or against France, and didn't have to worry about England. That would have met, let's say, a certain death for us, because Hitler could use all the power to fight against the Russians, take over the Soviet Union, and kill all of us. Just because a man like King Edward couldn't stay on being king of it, that helped us somehow, because he would have been very friendly. Like Lindbergh was very much for the Nazis, and Prince of Wales, before he became king, he went to Germany many times and praised the Air Force, how good everything was. He never would have been in a war against Hitler. We all would be dead. So it's somehow a connection with government people. Well, Paul, what are you saying?
We better wrap it up.
I had to shake your hand and say it's been an honor.
Good. It was nice to meet everybody. It was nice. Shalom.
My name is Chaim David Ben Yitzchak.
Oh.
It's an honor to hear you speak, sir.
You are from Israel, or you stay?
No, actually, I'm from Illinois.
Oh, good.
But I'm going to school out here.
Oh, how does it feel to be Jewish among the people? Is that a good feeling?
Yes,
people are nice to you?
Yes.
Yeah? No trouble?
No, I haven't. I've only had one instance.
Because this morning I talked to a Russian immigrant, to a Jewish girl, and I asked her how everything is. Well, she said it's pretty good, but still there's some, because she speaks a little bit with a Russian accent, she has a kind of, sometimes a bad time. But overall, it's pretty good. Do you study here?
Pardon me?
You study here in a university? Or
Yes.
How long you have to go? How many years?
Well, I've got about 2 more years.
And what are you taking?
Biology.
Biology. Mm-hmm. Cool. Nice to meet you.